In this session, we're going to automatically create walls from our spaces. And then we're going to go show how we can place walls, modify them, manipulate them, and do everything that you could with a wall. So to start with, let's have a look at those spaces. And we're going to be using a new type of tool. Here in our task-based interface, under element selection, click and hold and select by attributes. The Select by Attributes dialog box opens and we're going to be selecting an attribute. In other words, something that's pertinent to our structure that we've been using so far. So the first thing we're going to do is come down to the criteria section, and in this jump box here which says general, we're going to choose building. The criteria dialog box opens, twirl down the part, select the family, and then click on the jump box and come down and highlight space. With that, all you need to do now is click apply to see just how this works. Building Designer immediately selects every single space that is currently being used. And that's a plus because we can now utilize one of the other great utilities, element selection. We don't want all of the spaces. There's actually one that we don't need. So if we come to the element selection dialog box and click on this icon here called subtract, and then come to our atrium and the label and just click on it, you'll notice that we still have everything selected except for the one that we've subtracted. Because now we come back to our task-based interface, to our second row, third icon in, create walls from space, and we click on that. The create walls from space dialog box opens and we're going to click on this jump box to choose our wall that we want to place globally across here. Just a really quick, efficient way of placing these things. And you can see the Building Designer comes absolutely loaded to the gills with different types of walls. Exterior, interior, you name it, it's got it. We're going to go to our interior. We're going to scroll down here until we come to our studs. Metal studs at that. And we're going to come down here to our non-rated metal studs. And we can slide the slider bar just across here because the one we want is stud MTL 6 NR assembly 5/8 plus. Once we select that, you look down further in the dialog box, our placement options, a number of them are grayed out. We're going to be looking at those in a few minutes, but you can see that we have the ability to change the height. And in this case, we're going to click on our jump box here and change it to the underside of the next floor, 15 foot 8 inches. With that, all we need to do to place every single one of those walls is to click once in our view. And very quickly, all of the perimeters to our spaces currently now have a wall associated with them. In fact, that wall, this metal stud wall, but there's a bit of an overlap here. So let's press our right mouse button to reset. We're going to come up to our primary toolbar, to our references icon here. We're going to select the A underbar ground external, and we're going to come down here and turn off its display. Because you can see, now you get a better idea of the walls that have been placed. There's a bit of an overlap because we already have external walls in place. So what we want to do is get rid of those. To do that, we can come across to our task-based interface, click on the delete icon, and just go around and take out the walls around the perimeter. Once we've done that, we can now just come back up to our references and turn back on our display because there we have our external walls. Now the problem occurs is that if you come down to our tenant area here, you'll notice that we have this white gap, and this is where those walls were that enclosed our spaces. But Building Designer has a very neat way of dealing with this. If you come back up to our spaces bar here at the top, come to the fourth one in, update spaces, and just click on the labels themselves. And simply by clicking on the update spaces, clicking on the label, our spaces now once again fill the area that they're in, and their area is actually updated should it be greater or less than the area itself. And this is just a fantastic way of being able to set down as many walls or multiple walls in any time and space, because the beauty in Building Designer is that is never fixed. You can always go back into each and every single one of these walls, and if you so choose, for instance, we're going to come down to this one. Note the fact in tenant 4 the area is 292, and in tenant 5 the area is 601. But if we're to right click on our wall here and say move, for instance, watch how the two areas change, because Building Designer is dynamic in both the spaces, areas, the construction elements such as the walls, the doors, the windows. every area, including those which are referenced into them. With that, we've placed a series of walls. Let's zoom out of here, and before we go, we're going to zoom out and turn off the spaces in our top view. To do that, we're going to come to level display, which of course is Control E. We're going to make sure that A underbar ground int is highlighted, and then we're just going to uncheck A area. And that's it, they turn off in that particular view. That's fine, because what we want to do now is place some walls. To do that, come to your task-based interface, second row down, first icon in, place wall. We want to be able to place some back office type of walls. They're not structural, they don't have to be fire rated, but we're just going to place them because we want to define and demarcate out now back of house area for our retail area, our superstore. So we're going to come back down to our studs under our partition, single layer walls, and we're going to come in here, and we're going to come in and we're going to choose the 4-inch metal stud assembly. And with that, you can see when we select that one, we have placement options available open to us. For instance, our current one is a straight run of wall or a linear run. We could choose an arc or a curve, and you'll see how the preview updates as we choose those. We have orientation methods to place our walls with. Currently, we're on the left-hand side. We could go center or to the right-hand side. You can see that we have auto connect, flip, as well as close, and our top options can also be determined. Our placement dimensions, in this case, we don't have to go to full heights, we'll go to 12, and everything else we can leave as B. But the one thing we do want to do is change our orientation, because we want it to be to the right-hand side. With that, we're going to zoom in to this point here. AccuDraw and AccuSnap are highlighting to the point here, the return of this wall. We're going to select that once, and you can see straight away, here is our wall being placed. However, it's actually on the wrong placement point. So don't worry, Building Designer is dynamic enough to allow you in this design. We can come back to our orientation and just change that around. So you can see that very quickly, how it works with you. Once we've got this run of wall going up, AccuDraw helping us, throwing up this construction line, you can just hit the Enter key on your keyboard, and now that locks it in place. What we're going to do now is come up to this point here in our grid. We're going to click once, and then we're going to return. In this case, we're going to change the orientation to center. And all we need to do now is go across to the other side. You can see in our isometric that, in fact, you can see how the state of this wall is progressing. Come across here and place that wall. So there we have our defining wall. It's cutting off, it's demarcating off a new area in our actual retail area, and that's fine by us. But there's one other wall that we want to place, and that's down the bottom left-hand corner of our floor at this point. Here we are down the bottom left-hand corner, and what I actually want to place here as a tentative is potentially the likelihood of having an elevator shaft here. Now, under regulations and under various other codes and with our project team, I know that the elevator shaft must have a 2-hour fire rating. So what I'm going to do is come in here to my task-based interface to place wall. I'm going to click on the jump box here. I'm going to come down here and look for a 2-hour firewall. And here's a metal stud of 8 inches. I'm going to select that particular one. In our placement dimensions, I know it's got to go to the underside of the slab. So it's 15 foot 8 inches. I'm now going to move that dialog box out of the way, and it might be curious to note just what happens, watch what happens in the isometric at the same time. AccuDraw and AccuSnap help us by selecting the nearest point possible. And as I change this across, I'm going to actually change this and then move this across to scribe this action across here, and I'm going to right click to reset, and I have my elevator wall selected. Now you can see the wall below it is not the same type of wall. There's an easy way to do that in Building Designer, because not only do we have a right click contextual menu to copy, move, rotate, and mirror, but we also have all of these different options that go with any wall. The one we want is modify wall. The modify wall dialog box opens, and in this we're going to click on our jump box, and we're going to come down to our metal stud assembly. And when we've changed that to a different wall, we could change any of the parameters and values associated with that wall. When we finish that, all we have to do is click once in our model. We all know that not all walls are created equal. And in that, I mean that there are different types of walls and different ways of building them. to such an extent that Building Designer gives you that control, that level of control over placing any wall. What do I mean? Well, if we come back to our task-based interface, second row down, second icon, we have the ability to create offsets and directions. In this case, I have checked on extrusion direction, and you'll see that I have 2 in the X direction for every 10 in the Z direction. So every 10 units I'm going up, I'm also going to be counting it 2 units in the X direction. And you can choose any of these and impose them and implement them at any time. What we're going to be doing now, though, is taking a new wall, and the Place dialog box opens for us, and instead of scrolling through this very comprehensive list of wall types, I can actually come into the history of the walls I've already used, this icon here. And with that, I'm going to select this stud, 2.5 inch metal stud. What I'm going to do here, my placement options are going to be arc, and my orientation is going to be to the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this point here, and come down here and place the center point of the arc, and now place this, and I'm going to come across here and change the color to give you a much better idea of what we're looking at. You can see that there. I'm going to place that curve right there. And if we turn this around in our isometric view to right isometric, you'll be able to see now that we have this curved section of wall that we've placed. So not only is that a curved wall, but it's also sloping backwards at the same time. So one of the many other needs in walls and placing walls is the need to modify them. And in that sense, we're looking at perhaps reducing various quantities and qualities of them. What do I mean by here? Well, if you come to your task-based interface, the third row, the last icon, it's called Modify Form. What we're going to be doing here is one of the many options here. The most simplest one is modify the height of a form. And that's our first icon here. The method is that you can add a distance to an imaginary line, form, shape, or plane. We're going to use a distance, and we're going to be using by a point, and it's going to be absolutely relative. And we're going to use 9 feet as our absolute, because around our toilet cubicles here, we don't actually need them to the underside of the floor slab. They can actually be simply 9 feet. And that will do us very nicely, thank you. So we can just go around and at will just reduce these to perhaps the one that we wish to have. Now, while modifying the height or any of the other values is also incredibly important when it comes to walls, one of the other keen things about walls is probably breaking them or forming a gap. So let's use our pan key here and just move across here to this side where there's an entranceway, hopefully. Now, what we're going to do here is we're actually going to create the break here. And to do that, we're going to actually right click and we're going to come down here to activate, because this brick wall is actually in a reference file. So with Building Designer, you can actually go through your design and using the activate key, come in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to place a break in line with our grid lines. So what we can do now is, now that we're in, that exterior wall file has activated, I can come in and come to this tool here in our task-based interface, second row down, fourth tool in, break a wall. What I want to do here before I do this though, because this is a compound wall, it's made up of many items, I want to make sure that when I break it, the whole thing breaks with me. So to do that, make sure your graphic group is on, and also that your intersection is selected just for this particular moment in time, because we're going to select here once, and then we're going to cut down here to the next line and click again. And straight away, Building Designer has forced a gap neatly and precisely between those 2 grid lines. And once we finish this operation, we can simply just right click and we can say deactivate a ground exterior, and we're brought back into the modeling environment that we just left. And still the break is there. All the modeling facets, all the intelligence is brought with it. Building Designer keeps it all together, ready to share and ready to move on in the next phase of design. Thank you very much.